I was saving for her ring when I overheard the devastating truth. I'll brutally dump him after he proposes. My girlfriend laughed with her friends, unaware I was standing outside. For 3 years, I thought we were building a future while she was planning her escape. I said nothing, just walked away. 2 days later, she was screaming into my intercom, mascara running down her face, begging for forgiveness. But by then, I discovered the full extent of her betrayal with her married boss. This isn't just another cheating story. It's about how I reclaimed my dignity when infidelity shattered everything I believed about love and trust. My name is Nathan Richards. I'm 34 years old, and I'm about to share a story that completely changed the trajectory of my life. Before I dive into what happened, I want to say this: trust your gut. When something feels off in your relationship, it probably is. The signs of betrayal are often there long before we're ready to acknowledge them. I met Haley Carlson during our sophomore year at Westfield University. We were both taking Professor Donovan's American Literature class. I was passionate about becoming a teacher myself one day, while Haley was still figuring out her path. She sat 2 rows in front of me, and I couldn't help but notice her vibrant laugh whenever Donovan made one of his corny literary jokes. We became study partners after being assigned to the same group project. There was an immediate connection between us, the kind you can't manufacture or force. After acing our presentation on Hemingway, I finally worked up the courage to ask her out for coffee. That coffee date turned into dinner, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. After graduation, life took us in different directions. I pursued my master's in English literature, while Haley tried various jobs, never quite finding her calling. We stayed in touch through occasional texts and social media likes, but that was about it. 5 years later, I was scrolling through Facebook when I noticed Haley had commented on a mutual friend's wedding photos. I replied to her comment with a joke about Professor Donovan's class, and just like that, we were back in each other's orbit. We met for drinks to catch up, and it felt like no time had passed at all. Her smile still lit up the room, and that spark between us hadn't diminished one bit. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans to see each other again. I was teaching freshman composition at Lakeside Community College, working towards that elusive tenure-track position. Haley had just left a marketing job and was exploring freelance opportunities. Neither of us was exactly where we'd planned to be, but finding each other again felt like the universe was finally aligning things in our favor. Those initial dates were filled with laughter and reminiscing. We'd walk through the park near my apartment, grab takeout from Milo's Diner, and stay up talking until dawn about everything and nothing. It felt like we were making up for those 5 years apart, creating new memories while honoring our shared past. Within 3 months, we were officially dating. My colleagues noticed the change in me. I was more energetic in faculty meetings, less stressed about publication deadlines. My department chair, Dr. Sullivan, even joked that my happiness was improving student evaluations. When I introduced Haley to my circle of friends, they embraced her immediately. My best friend, Jordan, pulled me aside at his barbecue and said, "Don't let this one get away again, Nate. She's your person." I thought he was right. I thought I found my forever. Little did I know that what felt like the beginning of our happily ever after was actually the start of my personal nightmare. A painful lesson in trust, betrayal, and relationship deception that I never saw coming. After reconnecting with Haley, things moved quickly between us. Within 6 months, she had moved into my modest 2-bedroom apartment near campus. The place suddenly felt like a real home with her personal touches, framed photographs on the walls, colorful throw pillows on my previously plain couch, and the smell of actual home-cooked meals instead of my usual takeout. Our routines blended seamlessly. Every morning, I'd wake up early to prepare my lectures while Haley slept in. She wasn't a morning person, but she'd always stumble out of bed just before I left to kiss me goodbye. Those small moments of tenderness made even my toughest days at the college feel manageable. "You're going to get that tenure position, Nate," she'd say whenever I expressed doubts after a challenging faculty meeting. "Dr. Sullivan practically told you it's yours next year." I believed her encouragement because I needed to. The competition for tenure was brutal, and 3 other professors were vying for the same position. I spent countless late nights grading papers, revising my curriculum, and working on research publications to strengthen my application. Haley was supportive, at least on the surface. She'd bring me coffee during my late-night work sessions and listened patiently as I rambled about academic politics. But looking back now, I should have noticed how her eyes would glaze over whenever I talked about my career goals or long-term plans. My friends embraced Haley as part of our group. Jordan and his wife Emma frequently invited us over for dinner parties, and my colleague Mark and his husband David often joined us for weekend hiking trips. They all thought we were the perfect couple, the dedicated academic and his charming, adaptable girlfriend. "When are you going to make it official?" Emma asked during one dinner party, not so subtly eyeing Haley's ring finger. I felt my face flush. "Once I secure the tenure position," I explained. "I want to make sure we're financially stable first." Haley smiled and squeezed my hand, but there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Was it impatience? Disappointment? Whatever it was, it vanished so quickly I convinced myself I had imagined it. Our relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship is, but I thought we were solid. We had minor disagreements about her job-hopping tendencies and my workaholic habits, but nothing that threatened our foundation. Or so I believed. What I didn't realize then was how Haley's restlessness was growing. While I was building towards something stable and permanent, she was secretly yearning for something, or someone, different. The signs of infidelity were there, but I was too blinded by love and too consumed by my career ambitions to notice the subtle shifts in her behavior. The trust issues in our relationship were just beginning to surface, though I wouldn't recognize them until it was too late. About a year and a half into our relationship, I started noticing subtle changes in Haley's behavior. Nothing dramatic at first, just small inconsistencies that nagged at the back of my mind. She began taking more girls' nights out, with friends I'd never met. When I asked about these mysterious friends, she'd offer vague descriptions or quickly change the subject. The emotional affair was beginning, though I was too naive to recognize the signs. "It's just Melissa from my temp agency and some of her co-workers," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "You be bored with our girl talk anyway." I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? We'd known each other for years, shared a home, planned a future together. The possibility of infidelity never crossed my mind. Then came the job at Maxwell Industries. Haley called me during my office hours, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Nate, I got the executive assistant position. It pays twice what I was making at the temp agency." I was genuinely happy for her. After bouncing between jobs for so long, she finally had something promising. Maybe now she'd feel more secure about her financial future. "We should celebrate tonight," I suggested. "I'll pick up some champagne on my way home." "Actually," she hesitated, "the team is taking me out for drinks to welcome me aboard. You don't mind, right?" Of course I didn't mind. I wanted her to bond with her new colleagues. But that night was the first time she came home after midnight. Her cheeks flushed, smelling of unfamiliar cologne. My boss was showing everyone his new watch. She explained when I noticed her staring at her wrist the next morning. "It's a Rolex. Can you imagine spending that much on a watch?" The mention of her boss became more frequent after that. Daniel this, Daniel that. He was divorced, successful, drove a Tesla, and apparently had an amazing sense of humor. Every minor accomplishment at work was somehow tied to Daniel's praise or guidance. Meanwhile, I was making progress toward tenure. Dr. Sullivan had specifically mentioned me as a frontrunner, and my latest research paper had been accepted by a prestigious academic journal. But whenever I shared these victories, Haley's enthusiasm seemed forced. "That's great, babe," she'd say, eyes darting back to her phone. Daniel said something similar about persistence today. The marriage problems were beginning to surface, though we weren't even married yet. I started finding receipts for expensive lunches she couldn't afford on her salary. When questioned, she'd claim they were business meals. Her phone began staying face down on tables. She started working late more frequently, often forgetting to text that she wouldn't be home for dinner. Looking back, these were classic signs of relationship deception. But at the time, I chalked it up to her adjusting to a demanding new job. I was proud of her for finding her professional path, even if it meant seeing less of each other. I had no idea that the foundation of our relationship was developing serious cracks beneath the surface. As my tenure review approached, I threw myself into work. My department was buzzing with the news that Dr. Sullivan had personally endorsed my application. This was everything I'd been working toward: stability, recognition, and finally, the financial security to propose to Haley. I had even started researching engagement rings during my lunch breaks. Nothing flashy, but something meaningful that represented our journey together. I'd settled on a vintage sapphire ring from an antique shop near campus. The elderly owner, Mrs. Kennedy, had held it for me while I saved the final payments. "This is a forever ring," she told me with a knowing smile. "I can always tell when it's going to a good home." If only Mrs. Kennedy had warned me about the relationship crisis looming on my horizon instead. Meanwhile, Haley's behavior continued to change. She started dressing differently. More expensive clothes, higher heels, perfume that cost more than our monthly utility bill. When I complimented her new style, she'd beam and mention how professional she needed to look for her position. One evening, while doing laundry, I found a receipt in her jacket pocket for a hotel bar downtown. $187 for just 2 drinks and appetizers. We were trying to save money, and this splurge made no sense. When I casually mentioned it, Haley became defensive. "It was a business meeting with Daniel and a client," she snapped. "Sometimes we have to entertain at nicer places. That's how the corporate world works, Nate." The way she emphasized my name made me feel small, as if my academic career was somehow less valid than her corporate job. I backed down, not wanting to fight, but the incident left me unsettled. Jordan noticed the change in me during our weekly basketball game. After thoroughly beating me, something that rarely happened, he passed me a water bottle and gave me a concerned look. "You distracted, man. Everything okay with you and Haley?" I hesitated, then confided my concerns. "She's different lately. Distant. Always working late with this boss she can't stop talking about." Jordan's expression darkened. Classic signs of cheating. Bro, Emma went through something similar with her ex before me. "No way." I defended immediately. "We've been together for years. We have history." "History doesn't immunize you against betrayal," he replied, his tone gentler than his words. "Just keep your eyes open." That night, Haley texted that she would be home late again. Something inside me snapped. Instead of replying, "Okay," like usual, I decided to surprise her at her office. I'd bring dinner, show support for her hard work, maybe reconnect a bit. I picked up takeout from her favorite Thai place and drove downtown to Maxwell Industries. The security guard gave me a visitor pass, and I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The office was mostly empty, just a few people working late. Haley's desk, which she had described in detail during dinner conversations, was empty. No purse, no jacket, no sign of her. "Excuse me," I asked a passing employee. "I'm looking for Haley Carlson." The woman gave me a confused look. "Haley left hours ago. With Daniel. They were heading to Riverview for drinks, I think." Riverview was an upscale restaurant on the waterfront, known for its romantic atmosphere. My stomach nodded as I mumbled a thank you and walked back to the elevator, the Thai food growing cold in my hands. I didn't confront Haley that night. Instead, I drove home alone, the uneaten Thai food sitting on the passenger seat like a sad metaphor for my evening plans. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was truly just a business dinner. Maybe I was overreacting. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling as Haley slept soundly beside me. She'd arrived home around midnight, slightly tipsy, claiming the client meeting had gone long. I pretended to be asleep when she came in, not trusting myself to have a rational conversation. The next morning over coffee, I casually mentioned I'd stop by her office. "Oh." Her voice was carefully neutral, but I noticed how her hands tightened around her mug. "Why didn't you text first?" "Wanted to surprise you with dinner." I kept my tone light despite the heaviness in my chest. "The security guard said you'd left with Daniel hours earlier." "We had to meet a client at Riverview," she replied quickly. Too quickly. "I told you that in my text." She hadn't, but I didn't argue. Instead, I nodded and changed the subject. But the marriage problems we hadn't yet confronted were becoming impossible to ignore. That weekend, I received wonderful news. My tenure had been approved unanimously by the committee. After years of hard work, I'd achieved the professional stability I'd been striving for. The first person I called was Haley, eager to share my triumph and finally move forward with our engagement plans. "That's fantastic, babe," she exclaimed, background noise nearly drowning out her voice. "We'll celebrate tonight, I promise. I'm just wrapping up some weekend work with Daniel." On a Saturday, at what sounded like a restaurant or bar. When we did celebrate that evening, Haley seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly. The relationship crisis was reaching its breaking point, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. "What's going on with you and Daniel?" I finally asked after a phone buzz for the 5th time during dinner. Haley's expression shifted from surprise to indignation with practiced ease. "He's my boss, Nate. We work closely together. Is that all it is? Work?" Her face flushed. "What are you implying? That I'm cheating on you? After everything we've built together?" The betrayal in her voice almost made me back down. "Almost. I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted. "You're never home. You're always with him. You're keeping secrets." "I can't believe you don't trust me," she countered, tears welling in her eyes. Classic deflection. The argument continued back at our apartment, going in circles until we were both exhausted. Haley insisted there was nothing inappropriate happening, that I was being paranoid and insecure. Eventually, she stormed off to bed, leaving me alone with my doubts. I sat on the couch, contemplating our 3 years together and wondering if I'd somehow misread our entire relationship. The weight of my sapphire ring box sat heavy in my desk drawer, a painful reminder of the future I'd been planning. Little did I know that the true extent of her infidelity would soon be revealed in the most humiliating way possible. 2 weeks after our argument, things with Haley had settled into an uneasy truce. She'd made efforts to come home earlier, and I tried to suppress my suspicions. On the surface, we were working through our trust issues. In reality, we were just avoiding the deeper problems. My 10-year celebration was scheduled at La Maison, an upscale French restaurant downtown. The entire English department would be there, including Dr. Sullivan and the college dean. Haley had promised to attend, understanding how important this was to me. The evening of the celebration arrived, and Haley texted that she was running late, but would meet me at the restaurant. I arrived early to greet colleagues, and found myself making awkward small talk while constantly checking the door for her arrival. An hour passed. No Haley. I called twice, straight to voicemail. My colleagues gave me sympathetic glances as I checked my phone repeatedly. Dr. Sullivan patted my shoulder. "Everything all right, Nathan?" "Fine," I lied. "Haley's just stuck at work." The celebration continued without her. By the time dessert was served, I'd accepted she wasn't coming. My moment of professional triumph fell hollow. I left the restaurant around 10 p.m., driving aimlessly until I found myself near Maxwell Industries. The office building was mostly dark, but I noticed a few lights still on in the upper floors. On impulse, I parked across the street. I wasn't proud of myself, sitting there watching her workplace like some kind of stalker. But after being stood up at the most important professional event of my career, I needed answers. At 10:45, the front doors opened. Haley emerged, laughing, Daniel's arm wrapped around her waist. They stopped at the curb, and before my disbelieving eyes, she leaned up and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, a passionate embrace that revealed everything I'd been dreading. I felt sick. 3 years together, and she could betray me so casually. I started the car, intending to confront them, but stopped when a sleek black Maserati pulled up. Daniel opened the passenger door for Haley, then walked around to the driver's side. Instead of confronting them, I followed at a safe distance. They drove to Elysium, one of the most exclusive apartment buildings in the city. Together, they disappeared inside, clearly comfortable with their routine. I sat in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a cold, hard fact staring me in the face. My phone buzzed with a text from Haley. "So sorry I missed dinner. Emergency at work. Client crisis. Making it up to you tomorrow. Hugs and kisses." I stared at the message, at the casual lie she'd tossed my way while she was in another man's apartment. The relationship deception was worse than I'd imagined. I drove home in a daze, unsure what to do with this devastating truth. The morning after discovering Haley's betrayal, I sat at our kitchen table, staring into my coffee cup as if it might offer solutions to my relationship crisis. My mind kept replaying the image of her kissing Daniel, the casual way she'd wrapped her arms around his neck. The trust issues I'd been battling were now fully justified. When Haley finally came home around 8 a.m., claiming she'd crashed at Melissa's place after working late, I didn't confront her immediately. The depth of her infidelity had stunned me into a strange, calm clarity. "How was your celebration?" she asked, avoiding my eyes as she poured herself coffee. "You missed it," I replied quietly. "Everyone asked where you were. I told you. That client emergency. Stop lying, Haley. My voice remained level despite the storm inside me. I saw you with Daniel last night. The coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. What do you mean? I saw you kissing him outside Maxwell Industries. I saw you get into his Maserati. I saw you go into his apartment building. Her face drained of color. For once, she seemed speechless. The infidelity was finally out in the open, impossible to deny. It's not what you think, she stammered, employing the classic line of every caught cheating wife. Really? Because it looks like you've been having an affair with your boss while I've been planning to propose to you. Her eyes widened at the mention of a proposal, and I laughed bitterly. That's right. I was saving for a ring. I thought we were building a future together. Tears filled her eyes. Nathan, please, let me explain. Daniel and I, it just happened. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A mistake you made repeatedly, while lying to my face. The anger finally broke through. How long has this been going on? The entire time you've worked there? She looked away, confirming my suspicion. 8 months, she whispered. But I never meant to hurt you. That's what makes it worse. You deliberately deceived me for 8 months while I trusted you completely. The betrayal stung afresh with each word. Was anything between us real, or was I just convenient until something better came along? Of course what we had was real, she insisted, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Nathan, please. We can work through this. People overcome infidelity all the time. We can get relationship advice, counseling. There's no saving this marriage before it even starts. I interrupted. You didn't just cheat on me. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues. You weren't there for the most important night of my career because you were with him. I stood up, suddenly unable to bear being in the same room with her. I want you out of the apartment by the end of the week. As I walked away, I heard her sob behind me. The sound held no power over me anymore. The relationship deception had killed whatever love remained. The week after my confrontation with Haley was surreal. We moved around each other like ghosts in our apartment, both packing, me packing away memories, her packing to leave. The betrayal had created an unbridgeable chasm between us. Jordan and Emma insisted I stay with them for a few days to give Haley space to move out. No one should have to watch their relationship collapse in real time, Emma said, her experience with infidelity making her advice particularly valuable. I threw myself into end-of-semester grading, finding strange comfort in the mundane task of evaluating comma splices and thesis statements. My colleagues noticed my subdued demeanor, but respectfully kept their distance, except for Dr. Sullivan. Whatever you're going through, Nathan, remember that personal crises pass, but your achievements remain, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. That tenure is yours because you earned it. His words were a lifeline in my sea of relationship deception. I returned to my apartment on Saturday to find it half empty. Haley had taken her belongings, leaving behind only a handwritten letter on the kitchen counter. Nathan, I know nothing I say can undo the pain I've caused. The trust issues between us are my fault entirely. What started as admiration for Daniel turned into an emotional affair, and then something more. I was selfish and weak. You deserve better than a cheating partner. You deserve someone who recognized your worth, who would have been proud to stand beside you at your 10-year celebration instead of betraying your trust. I won't ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know that what we had was real for me too, at least in the beginning. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what truly mattered. I'm staying with Melissa until I find a new place. Daniel and I are over too. He was never going to leave his wife, something I was too blind to see. I hope someday you find someone worthy of your loyalty. Haley. I read the letter twice, then crumpled it and threw it away. Her marriage problems with Daniel weren't my concern. The revelation that he was married only confirmed how completely I'd misjudged her character. That night, I sat alone in my half-empty apartment, feeling strangely unburdened. The pain was still there, but alongside it was the first flicker of relief. The relationship crisis had reached its natural conclusion, and somehow, I had survived. I called Mrs. Kennedy at the antique shop the next day and told her I wouldn't be picking up the sapphire ring after all. Hearts heal, Professor, she said kindly. And when yours does, the right ring will find its way to the right person. I want to believe her. 2 weeks after Haley moved out, I had settled into a new routine. My days were filled with teaching, faculty meetings, and finally unpacking boxes for my new office, the one that came with tenure. The betrayal still hurt, but each day brought incremental healing. Until Wednesday evening, when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened the door to find Haley standing there, eyes red and puffy from crying. The sight of her sent conflicting emotions racing through me. Anger, longing, and an unsettling pity. "Nathan," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, can I come in? Just for 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She walked in, looking around at the rearranged furniture, physical evidence of my attempt to erase our shared history. "I made a terrible mistake," she blurted out, turning to face me. "Daniel ended things completely. His wife found out about us and threatened to take everything in the divorce." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And this concerns me how." "I realize what I threw away," she said, stepping closer. "No one has ever loved me like you did. No one ever cared about my dreams the way you did. You're only saying that because your plan B fell through." I replied, surprised by my own clarity. "That's not love, Haley. That's convenience." "No." She moved toward me, grabbing my hand. "I know I can't undo the infidelity, but people overcome marriage problems all the time. We could try counseling." I gently but firmly removed her hand from mine. "We're not married, Haley, and now we never will be. Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything. I'll change jobs. I'll give you all my passwords. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild the trust." For a brief moment, I remembered the woman I planned to propose to, the woman I thought I knew. But that person had never really existed. "I think you should go," I said quietly. "Nathan, please." Her voice rose desperately as I opened the door. "You can't throw away 3 years over one mistake." It wasn't one mistake. It was hundreds of choices you made every day for 8 months. The realization strengthened my resolve. Every lie, every text, every time you chose him. Those were all choices to betray my trust. She stood in the doorway, mascara running down her cheeks. "What if I wait? What if I prove to you that I've changed? I'll be happy for you if you change, Haley. But it won't be for me." As I closed the door, I heard her crying in the hallway. My hand hesitated on the knob for just a moment before I walked away, finally free from the relationship deception that had held me captive for too long. 1 year after the painful end of my relationship with Haley, I sat in my office at Lakeside Community College, reviewing applications for the new assistant professor position in our department. My tenure had brought new responsibilities, including serving on the hiring committee. Outside my window, spring had arrived, bringing fresh greenery to the campus quad. The betrayal that once consumed my thoughts had faded to an occasional reminder, a lesson learned rather than a wound that still bled. I'd spent the past year rebuilding, focusing on my career and rekindling friendships that had taken a back seat during my relationship. Jordan and Emma had been my rocks, including me in family dinners and never allowing me to isolate myself. Through their support network, I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me that trust issues could be overcome with time and the right person. As I sorted through the applications, my phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Sullivan. "Don't forget, department dinner at Riverview tonight, 7 p.m. New dean will be there." Riverview, the restaurant where Haley had gone with Daniel that night. Once, that would have triggered a cascade of painful memories. Now it was just a restaurant with good food. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Haley had moved to Chicago for a fresh start. The news brought neither joy nor sorrow, just acknowledgement that life continues moving forward for everyone. The last application in the stack caught my attention. A promising young literature scholar who had published innovative work on Hemingway, the same author Haley and I had presented on during our college days. The memory brought a slight smile rather than pain. Later that evening, as I entered Riverview, I spotted my colleagues at a large table near the windows. Among them was a woman I didn't recognize, likely the visiting professor for Boston that Dr. Sullivan had mentioned. "Nathan." Dr. Sullivan waved me over. "Come meet Dr. Olivia Chun. She's joining us for the fall semester." As I approached, Dr. Chun turned, offering a warm smile and an extended hand. "Professor Richards, I've read your work on modern American literature. Your analysis of alienation themes is fascinating." Our handshake lingered a moment longer than necessary, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a genuine connection, free from the shadows of past relationship deception. Over dinner, Olivia and I discovered shared interests beyond literature: hiking, classic films, and a mutual addiction to crossword puzzles. When she mentioned she was still looking for housing near campus, Emma kicked me under the table, her eyes communicating a not-so-subtle message. As the evening ended, I found myself writing my phone number on Olivia's copy of the fall schedule. If you need any help navigating the area or want recommendations, feel free to call, I offered. I might take you up on that. She replied with a smile that reached her eyes. Walking to my car, I realized something profound. The painful chapter with Haley had truly ended. Ahead lay an unwritten story, one where trust might be rebuilt and genuine love found again. The betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't defined me. Life, like literature, continues beyond the difficult chapters.